Thanks so much for coming. I know we're getting towards the end here, but really appreciate everybody being here and for the opportunity to talk a little bit about some of the things that we're doing in New York City. So my co-presenter, Tony Cox, is from Rock Hill, South Carolina. So we're two very different school districts, but we've really found, and we just met last week, and we've really found how many things we really have in common. And I'm sure a lot of you feel the same way. So the way that Tony and I kind of want to do this is we're each going to talk for, as briefly as possible, giving you a little bit of an overview of what we're each doing. But then we really hope to be able to have kind of a discussion with you if you guys have questions. We probably have questions for one another too, but that's kind of what we're aiming to do, just to kind of give you guys a heads up. So again, I'm Meredith McDermott. I'm the Director of Sustainability for the New York City Department of Education. My office sits within the Division of School Facilities, so it's quite a large operation, as you can imagine. I was just talking with my boss last night, and I was trying to get some of the numbers. A lot of you have asked me, like, what is your operating budget? And I was like, I think I know, but I'm not entirely sure. So I actually got him to confirm this for me last night. Our operating budget and this is operating only, this is not capital, is for fiscal year 19 is $1.4 billion. We have a $700 million custodial budget. We've got a $350 million maintenance budget, and then our utilities are about $250 million a year just for our organization. So it's pretty, and then there's some miscellaneous and infrastructural things thrown in there, which always ends up amounting to quite a lot. So just to give you a little bit of a snapshot, there's a lot of different things that I could put up on this slide, but of course I didn't want to do that. But everybody knows New York City's big. Nobody needs to hear that again. It's absolutely massive. Every single day we kind of grapple with the scale on which we operate. We've got just under 1,900 public schools. We've got just over 1.1 million students. About 85,000 teachers. That's a conservative estimate. It's probably over 90,000 at the moment. And again, that's just teachers. Full-in staff, in terms of direct staff, is probably around 150,000, 160,000 full-time employees. We've got over 1,300 buildings, so you see we have more schools than we have buildings. I know a lot of you have probably been undergoing this as well, but we have a lot of shared campus buildings. We can have 7 schools in a building. And guess what that means? That means you've got 7 principals in a building, but you've got 1 custodian engineer, so 1 building manager. And it can present some interesting situations. Sometimes it works great, sometimes it doesn't. And when it comes to facilities management especially, and then of course our sustainability programming, we really have to look at the buildings for certain programs. You're talking about utility use, you're talking about waste production. We have to look at that on a building scale because of the fact that that's how those services are provided, of course. Just some things that I think are kind of interesting. We've got, the average age of our buildings is 68 years, so we've got aging infrastructure, lots of very, very old buildings. We also have a decent number of newer buildings coming online, a pretty active capital program where there's, renovations and things, just, your usual things happening all the time. We've got about 131 million square feet of facility space to manage and to make sure that we're keeping our students warm, safe, and dry. So just, again, a snapshot of some of the resources that we use. All of our students are provided free breakfast and free lunch every single day. We are the second largest food service provider in the country behind the U.S. military. So that's it's a very kind of hits home when you hear it. When I first heard that, I thought, my head almost spun around. I thought, oh my goodness, you think that's an amazing undertaking every single day. We constitute over a quarter of the city's total energy use, which again is, as there's a lot of pressure on us to always make sure that we're operating more efficiently, that we're reducing utility costs for the city. We're configured in a very interesting way. The city, another organization, actually pays the utility bills. So just another added layer of bureaucracy that we have, but it's really interesting. So they do a lot of the contracts for things, but then we are really the largest We're the largest city agency by a long shot. So we really comprise most of the programs that exist in the city, especially for sustainability. So it's kind of an interesting position that we have. Our annual heat, light, power budget, that's the city budget, the $325 million, and like I said, the Department of Education makes up about $240 to $250 million of that budget. The city's waste budget, $320 million. One thing that you may or may not know, New York City ships its garbage to other states, South Carolina being one of them. So I'm sure that makes a lot of people in the room very happy. We do. We spend a lot of money to put garbage on trains and barges, and we send it out of state to a lot of different neighboring states. It's not a great thing, which is one of the reasons that we're working pretty actively on a few major programs so that we're not only reducing those costs, but we're reducing the need to utilize landfills in surrounding areas. You know, it shouldn't be, if it's not going to go in our own backyard, why does it have to be everybody else's problem? So some of the aggressive goals that we're very accountable for achieving, these are just, some snapshots. These are certainly not a comprehensive list. We have to reduce our energy consumption from a 2008 baseline, so 35% by 2025. That's not very far away. And energy consumption, that is primarily really relying on humans. It's relying on human behavior. And I think that kind of probably raises some alarm bells. It raised some in me as well. When I first heard that, it's like, that's a very aggressive reduction goal that's really relying on people being responsible and powering things down, shutting systems off. If a room is not in use, making sure that the air conditioning units are not on 60 degrees and going all night, right? Those are the problems that we do encounter. We also have a very strict greenhouse gas emissions reduction goal, so 80% by 2050. Now, that is not human behavior based. That is really, we're talking about lots of different things infrastructurally that are going to have to happen in order for that to be achieved. And this is, every city agency, everybody in New York City is responsible for achieving this. But again, because we have the largest building portfolio, this is obviously a big one. We're a pretty active participant in this. There was a new executive order that was passed last year by Mayor de Blasio that said, when Trump said, we're not going to do the Paris Climate Accord, and everybody could have their opinions about that. Regardless, New York City said, we are going to uphold the Paris Climate Accord and basically still try to keep our emissions down. And so what we had to do is we had to, within about 6 weeks' time, we had to go on turbo drive to figure out down to like equipment level, figure out what we could do for energy conservation measures, like down to pieces of equipment in every single one of our buildings in that rapid a timeline. So it was very, very, it was a big challenge, but we're kind of up for it. We've got one of the largest solar programs in the country. So we've currently got about 11 megawatts. The goal is for 100 megawatts for all city agencies. And we make up about 60% of the city's total solar program. So a big chunk. Zero waste, I talked about waste a minute before. We're trying to get all schools to be zero waste. So does that mean no garbage? No, it doesn't, of course. But we are trying to divert as much material as we can from landfills, so through recycling and through our organics collection program. So food scraps, and we've got compostable plates in the lunchroom. So we're making progress, but it's a big undertaking. So a couple things that I want to tell you guys about programs of ours. Our demand response program. Has anybody heard of this? Does anybody have that type of program? Awesome. So it's basically a utility emergency. So during periods of peak stress on the electricity grid, what the grid operators will do, and this happens, it might not happen. Last summer, we only had 4 emergency events. The most recent summer, we had 19 events. So it varies, it's totally based on temperature. What we do is the buildings that are enrolled, we've got just over 300 buildings, so it's about 650 schools total. What they do is we come up with a plan based on that building's mechanics, it's mechanical systems, it's equipment, and basically it's base load. So we look at that. we come up with a commitment that they have to achieve if these emergency events are activated. And what we do is if we are told by Con Edison, okay, we're going to have an event, we are given no more than 22 hours of advance notice. Sometimes for some programs, we only have 2 hours notice. And what we have to do is we have to make sure that all of the custodian engineers and all of our facilities directors are aware that this is happening during a prescribed period of time. Now, what we do during these events, we only have 247 of these buildings have real-time meters. So for those ones during events, we actually are able to monitor what's going on. At the other ones, we can't. So we're trying to get real-time meters in all of these buildings so that we can really understand what's going on and be able to help people to achieve what they are supposed to achieve for their performance level. The cool thing about this program is that we are really saving the city a ton of money. So we do not get all of that money right back to us. They don't say, here you go, Meredith, you can take all of it. But what we do get is we do get a return on it. We do get a percentage of the savings that we achieve for the city. Now, when I first started at the DOE 3 years ago, my first summer, we got about just under $1 million of revenue, and that was a big deal. That had doubled from the year before. We are now at after this last summer, this last year, we'll wrap up at about $2.8 million of revenue. And some of the things that we do with that, we did $1.6 million in LED retrofits last year with that revenue, which is a tremendous, a lot of these schools, they don't otherwise have the funding to be able to do this. So we're trying to do upgrades. This year, we're going to be doing about $1.7 million in thermostat and valve replacements. Schools need that. We'll also be doing a steam trap replacement program. So where we're really funding these things through this revenue. We also give awards to our highest performing custodians. So the revenue is pooled. It's then allocated based on the performance that these guys achieve. And then what we do is we make a big deal of it. We have them come, shake the big man's hand. They get a nice plaque. They also get a check. It can be up to $30,000, and it goes to their school's budget. So it's meant to be used for energy efficiency projects. But these are the types of things that, even if they're winning $5,000, these are the types of things that they're incentive programs, as well as a really good way for them to kind of make more efficient their facilities. And again, they need all the help that we can get. So it's a tremendous program. I used to work at Chicago Public Schools, and I wish that we had done something like this there because A, we needed the money, right, as I think we all do, and it was a great way to put forth some sustainability programming, but to do it in a facility, through a facilities lens, which is really important, and it's the only way that we're really going to get our building managers, our facilities teams, to really kind of understand that sustainability programs are very rooted in education and training, but they really are also very rooted in facilities, right? Facilities and operations. So this can play a big part, and it can actually really help people out. So that's helped me a lot to kind of, gives me a little bit of leverage within my division. People think, sustainability, whatever. But it's really given me a lot of leverage, and it's through programs like this that really make that happen. So I'm not going to go through all of these graphs. I just want to show you when an event is called, and this would be if we were taking a snapshot from a real-time meter, what we're really trying to see is just this. So about 30 minutes before that event period is to start, what we want to see is a dip like this shows there. And so it's really going to be pitching. Their performance is going to be compared against 2 hours before the event starts. So 30 minutes, start backing off the equipment. They have a policy and procedure that's laid out specifically for their building, so they know their protocols. We do trainings. We've got a data platform that we do a lot of outreach for with our custodial staff. And we found that we're making some progress in the performance because of tools like this. But this is, showing a good thing. We've had some incidents where sometimes events are called and people just, they're not around. We don't know where they are. They're not responding. Maybe it's a sick day. Maybe it's after hours. Sometimes principals just flat out try to block this from happening. It shouldn't, the principal should have, it should have no bearing on the comfort, like the thermal comfort of buildings. We're not telling people to turn off air conditioners in classrooms where students and teachers are present. We're really saying, especially during the summer, which is mostly when these events happen, we're saying, if you have empty classrooms, we don't need the AC units on there, right? So practical things just to make some significant energy reductions. And really what that does is it prevents blackouts and brownouts from happening in the city. So that's a nice resilience piece, but it's sustainability in action. But we have not had a blackout in the city in a while, and they're really attributing a lot of these types of programs to that specifically. So again, we're really trying to look at demand response is part of this overall demand management. It's one element of it, but we're looking more and more at peak shaving, load management. We want to make sure that we're reducing our overnight base loads are very, very high. So meaning people are using way too much energy in our schools at night. Why? Well, people leave lights on. No matter how many policies and things you do to get it out there, it still happens. People still leave ACs on overnight all the time in the summer. So we want things to be a little bit more staggered. We want to see those baselines coming down. We want to see weekend use much, much lower. A lot of our schools are used basically 24/7 all throughout the year, which gets to be a big challenge. We've got tons of after-school programs. So our buildings are not just schools during normal school hours, not anymore. And I'm sure that's a familiar thing for many of you. So this is not meant to, we're not going to talk too much about it. I just want to get like your takeaway from this. It's you look at that and it looks like an EKG, right? It's very erratic. This is very, very erratic. This is kind of what our energy use is really looking like now. What we want to get it to is something that's a little bit more like this. So crazy and erratic and staggered versus really pretty consistent. This is over several years period of time. So, you can probably take guesses as to why there are some peaks, why there are some. It's just temperature related, but we want to see just more evening out. And again, really making sure that we are reducing when it is practical to do so. So just, a quick bit about our solar program. So we right now have about 38 buildings that have solar on it. We are at the precipice, like literally the precipice of a major onslaught of solar. So we've been designing a lot of programs. We've got about 130 buildings of solar that are in some stage of development. So we've got about 50 of them that are already designed that we just have to start construction. We keep adding more and more tranches to these things. So we are doing a whole lot of solar. We have a free professional development program that goes along with it for teachers. So we're trying to educate about this as well. This is my last one. I'm just going to take a few extra seconds. So the way that we're able to do this, that I think you guys might find interesting, the way that we're able to do this, the city has done a power purchase agreement. So the way that this is viable for us, it's our only real viable vehicle to putting solar on our buildings. The capital outlay for us is nothing. The capital outlay for the city is nothing. So what it is this is all vendor owned, and there's that financial incentive that's baked into that arrangement where if a third party owns and operates this system, if panels go down, guess who's going to want to get out there to fix it immediately? These guys want to get out there to fix it immediately. So they're financially incentivized to do that. It also alleviates some of the maintenance aspects of it on our teams at our schools, which is very, very helpful, and we have to consider. We do all of the coordination. We do design reviews, project management. We arrange for all of the scheduling of the construction teams, all of the installers, the design teams, et cetera. But the cool thing with this is that we are actually pulling, so this is plugged into the school switchgear. We are actually pulling first from the clean energy source before the energy comes from the electrical grid. So it's a pretty cool program, and it's just absolutely blowing up at the moment. This is the last thing. We're basically trying to make use of our many, many emergency shelters that we have. Resiliency is big in New York City, as it is for many of you. Post-Hurricane Sandy from 2012, lots of infrastructure damage, of course. So the city's really been thinking hard about resilient infrastructure. And so what we're trying to do is, with all this solar that we're doing, we're really trying to get some battery storage at these sites so that we can actually have a backup power source, because right now we don't. Right now there is no backup solar. The solar is not a backup power source. But these batteries would enable it. These things are about the size of a tractor trailer, so they're not tiny little batteries, they're huge. And that's one of the big problems that we have. Siting, the fire department is actually the biggest barrier right now, because there's a lot of safety concerns. And if you're talking about public schools, these are things that you have to consider. So this is something that we hope to, every year, be able to say, we are working on these projects and we hope to be able to bring some of them to life. We're in conversations with Tesla right now on this program. So I'm going to turn it over to Tony Cox from Rock Hill.
All right. I just met Meredith, and already she's given me all her garbage. So, but we actually make a good team. I'm really grateful for this matchup, because she's big and I'm small in the district sense, and she talked about some really big, huge efforts, and I'm going to talk to you today about some really small things, but ones that add up and engage your schools to make this a permanent kind of program, rather than just something that people kind of push to the side, and as long as it saves a little bit of money and some people feel good about it, it's great. So I'm basically an old facilities engineer for many decades. I'm an environmental engineer by degree, but I am a closet green guy. I have really tried to follow and practice sustainability, not just as a way to save the planet, but as a way to save our taxpayers as well. So we've approached that. This is my third district, so I've started three programs in schools and one in the military, and kind of built on what we've done. So I got some kind of neat things. I hope we can kind of keep it light and move quick on it. This is my school district. It is just below Charlotte, North Carolina. It's one of 4 districts in a county. So we are about 18,000 students. We're not even in the top 10 for districts, even in the state of South Carolina. But we are the largest in that county, a very diverse group of folks. It is a small city of about 75,000 people. It's about 15 minutes south of Charlotte, just over the state line and a river. We are probably typical in a lot of the stats that you're seeing from what I would call an average school district with a semi-urban to urban district. We have over 50% free and reduced rating, and a lot of the associated challenges that our big sister to the north of us deals with, but we deal with it kind of in a smaller scale. We are kind of progressive in our network that we have with a 4-ring fiber optic network. We have a 4 gig network, which I thought was huge, but we actually bumped our capacity. Anybody want to take a guess what 3 days we bumped our capacity this past year? This will tell you something about digitally learning. It was the 3 days before Thanksgiving break. What do you think's going on before Thanksgiving break? We've got a whole lot of online shopping going on company time, folks. That's what's happened. And we figured that out because we can see into it with the technology department's capability. We are 100% Wi-Fi, and 3 to 12 grades, we are 1-to-1 with a Windows platform. She does 1 million meals a day. I do 14,500, so I ought to be speaking like a chipmunk up here compared to that. And I just thought, she said she had a $700 million custodial budget. How big is yours? I said, 5. So we do have a nice little claim to fame. If you have a son and he wants to play in the NFL someday, you need to move to my city because we are Football City, USA. And we've got probably about we average about a player a year going into the NFL for the past 13 years. So some really good football down there. The sustainability program that we started, and we were the first one to get to paper with a policy in the state, is built on 7 areas that we think work for K12. A lot of things work for higher ed, but we kind of zeroed it in because we do have a mixture in our community of some very progressive elements, and we had a lot of Tea Party folks in our district, and they kind of are like a salad dressing mixture, and they come together. So when you pitch a sustainability program or an energy management program, you're walking a narrow road. Found an approach that works. Hope it does for y'all. So what we do there, energy and water conservation is where we started. We jumped into the recycling bandwagon. We are starting to build some green buildings. So I know this is here with the USGBC. I'm working on it. Green cleaning in our schools. Looking at our grounds and land use as well. How we're cutting our grass and when makes a lot of difference when we have 1,300 acres to tend. Our transportation system itself, of course, and then some purchasing practices, all founded on an education and awareness platform. Pull out that branch that says energy management. That's what I'll talk about today. We kind of set it up as a 3-pillared building. And I've got the 3 E's, really starting with some policy and procedures, binding it together with some teamwork. We talk about our energy ethic, our energy efficiency, and our energy equity. So really that's the agenda for the rest of this few minutes here. We are trying not to freeze and burn up kids in the dark. I spent some time in the military with energy reduction programs that were forced overseas. I even had a Norwegian sergeant that went around with a large pair of shears and would actually cut off the electrical leads of all the space heaters and electric toasters that moms sent their young Army soldiers and sailors deployed in their little care packages. It was actually taking the entire J3 operations center offline every day in a blackout. Not that kind of thing. We want to improve our learning environment, stay close to the mission, so we're engaging the students actually and keeping it simple. And we're basing it on industry standards. Okay. The following photos were taken by me, and I recommend if you're associate superintendent, somebody at that level, go ahead and grab your energy manager or your maintenance director and have them take you through your schools at night. You will see some phenomenal things. The following photos were taken between midnight and 5 a.m. by me over the course of several years. So that is an elementary school at midnight with all the lights off. There's something called egress and exit lighting, folks, that is mandated by code that can be 100 light fixtures burning in an elementary school 24/7. You can't ever control them, or can you? That is a gymnasium in Toledo, Ohio, not one of my districts, but I was consulting there, also midnight, with all the lights switched off. This is one of my computer labs at about 1 o'clock in the morning at a middle school that also had a big bay window on the outside. So this is like a little window shopping for a criminal to basically say, just throw a rock through there. And here's some of our lovely classrooms with some very dubious little things sitting on the counter. And it just gets better. I love the lava lamps. And my personal favorite, the bubbling fake fish aquarium, ladies and gentlemen. Absolutely no purpose whatsoever, especially at 2 o'clock in the morning. And then you get into some safety infractions, like these were left on overnight, and if you'll notice, they're actually using the outlet juncture as the weight support for the whole light string up over the whiteboard. So just a fire waiting to happen, and there's a lot of fuel on either side of that outlet box to burn. We actually tallied it up, even for my small district. 310 kilowatts are being left on at any one time. And you just multiply that by 10 hours and 190 nights a year, and it gets to be pretty sizable. You can actually run an extra school with that. So we came up with the players and a game plan. What we basically did was set up a campus energy team at each one of our schools. Easier to do at elementaries than it is at high schools, but if you appeal to the right audience, you can get in. Some will adopt it early, and I'll show you, and some will be later. We started with, just going to call it the organism. The brain is the principal. The spinal cord is the custodial staff and its leadership. And then you got some pretty vital things, and we basically had to let people know every one of your schools is 5 different public buildings under one roof. You have a gymnasium, like a fitness center. You have a public library. You have a restaurant, and you have an office building. And so we've got reps from each of those areas and had them start getting some ownership of their particular area in order to save this and make it a people-centric, people-owned program. We actually did some extra training and some credentialing for the lead site custodian, and we made them the building energy manager. Even cool, you slap a little tag on them and call them a beamer, okay? Get a hat, get a shirt, get a thing for the wall. I haven't talked anything about salary yet, have I? I will, but it's amazing what that kind of empowerment will do for a person like that. In a lot of cases, I actually had to haul them back a little bit and say, don't get on the teacher quite so much, she's doing okay. So we actually had that cranked up pretty hard and good, and it worked out really well. Then you get a game plan and some rules, and I know you can't read it, but what it is a checklist. Probably all of you have a checklist. I will tell you, as we progressed, we got specialized. We have a checklist, that one's for cooling season, little blue frame. I've got one for heating season. I've got one, that's the daily, but I also have a seasonal version. Had a special one for Thanksgiving and winter break, one for spring break, and of course, a very different looking one for summer break as they get ready and clean up and shut down. We also wound up, as things progressed, with having to have a kitchen version and a media center version and an athletics version because those all are different buildings. So got all those, and then notice the dots. I'll come back to those in a minute, but blue basically means just do this on the weekends. Green, or the hatch, means do it every day. Red means don't ever do it, because I had people yanking cords out from the power bars, powering their computers, and IT got mad at me and so forth. And then changing the culture, working from who you are or knowing who you're dealing with and becoming a different person, if you will, as you go through it. You're going to have some early adopters, and I apologize if I'm profiling or stereotyping here. This is my experience. You may have had something different. Just shuffle them for yourself. But the early adopters tend to be the teachers, especially the elementary teachers, and the office staff, once you figure out how to explain it to them. The ones in the middle, that 80% in the middle, is the See It Work or What's in It for Me group, and that will include students, parents, the custodians themselves, what's in it for me, and the maintenance staff, maintenance mechanics themselves. The late adopters I have found are the IT staff and the food service folks, because they're specialized, and, oh God, the coaching staff, especially at the high schools, especially for the athletic facilities and outbuildings that you have. Be Mr. Nice Guy up front. Start building your army. Give your room a little TLC, as a little flyer we had, temperature, lights, and computers. Tells them right away what to shut off at the end of the day. Educating those educators, which can sometimes be a challenge. I mean, I have to say, even though I am an educator myself. Savings at home. You can do these things and get $50 a month out of savings at home. Gets their attention. They bring it back. Classroom and office contests, including a poster contest for students. Do some of those kind of things. Then you get into, as your program goes, being a strategic mover. You're building alliances with some of those late adopters. Come alongside your cafeteria manager, say, hey, what if you didn't turn on your hood until 10 minutes before you started cooking, rather than just shove it on at 5 in the morning and keep it on for 10 hours, suck out all the conditioned air in the building. And then you can do some separate contests for them to get them engaged. You can also do some partnerships with your local utilities. They can pony up thousands of dollars, folks, before you know it, and you can really use that. Get fishy. Start getting some people around you that are going to go for the same objectives, but you can use them as levers. The fire folks, the safety, the health, and the environmental folks. That's the fishy that you gather around yourself. Become friends with the fire marshal. Hey, let them be the bad guy in a lot of cases, because that same ding that they're catching somebody on having a power bar into a power bar into a power bar into 3 refrigerators in a classroom can help you out as well. So teaming up with them, the nurses themselves, and things like that. And then you can do some cash incentives. If you're going to do that, I recommend starting with custodians. We started with a $400 once a year bonus for our lead custodians, And then we did something equating to $125 a year for a full-time custodian, all the way down to $35 if he was a couple hours a week. You wouldn't think that sounds like a lot, but they ate it up. One other thing, by the way, we actually dispersed the check the payday before Black Friday. Booyah, we're there, we're going, we're rolling. They adopt, they get it going. Then you can look at some school level folks, prizes, then some staff level prizes, individual prizes, I'll show you in a minute, and then some student and parent prizes that I'll show you at the end. One of them was, this was the staff level or the classroom level shutdown. We just called it the Energy Apple. It was a door hanger, so it's very visible not only to the teacher who gets it when they come in the morning, yay, but all the other teachers on the hall that didn't get it. So it looks like this, and we found out it was so phenomenal that they even took their past winnings and they posted them on the wall outside their door like medals on a chest. And it was just awesome. We were off to the races. We do have some other tips. I'm not going to read them to you right now just in the interest of time, but one of the things is the DOTS system there for breaker panels. Breaker panels in other places. I'm going to get some guys in the room here that's going to argue that I shouldn't be exercising my breakers that often, but I've actually found out I've never worn one out if you stick to certain seasonal items. Okay, I actually revised this and took off the daily one because I really don't want to work them every day, but you have some weekend things where you can shut some things down, and as long as you're paying attention to not hitting the red breakers, you're okay. Putting some diagrams on top of your lights. This is one of my favorite ones. You've all got those 14 gang switches in the media center, right? Or 12 or whatever it is. This was a training room. What do people do? Media specialist comes in, spends about 3 hours a day where nobody else is in there but him or her. But when they come in, what do? They do the forearm turn-on method. Instead, teaching them with the diagram like this, if you're only going to be on the right-hand side, click, there we go. I actually had this doing with some middle school coaches because your gymnasiums, by the way, you hold PE here. There's a whole bunch of lights over here for the fans when you have the games. Don't need to be on. So just putting on the middle ones. And oh, by the way, every other row is good because there's actually a different level for competitions than there is for PE. So you can save a whole ton of money, especially if you got those old mercury vapor ovens hanging in your ceiling. Some other stuff here as well. Outlying buildings are just a tough case. Extracurricular-based places like band rooms, outlying buildings, gymnasiums, locker rooms. Honest to God, I'd love to just have the simple push button, 3 hours, 4 hours. You've got that because I guarantee you they're being left on at your schools right now, and they just don't have any other way to come off. And they're too far out to run your EMS wires. Some other things that Meredith has already talked about as well with retro commissioning and also a summer mode. Basically, reprogramming some things so that there's 0% outside air coming in during the summer. You just don't need it. There's not enough people in the building to actually have to satisfy the ASHRAE code for the 15% minimum CFMs or air in the building. So a lot of other things in there. I'll pass it because I'm about to run out of time. Make it your policy to go for green. At least make it your goal to go for the Energy Star where you can. We started with our policy, and if you'll notice right there on the map of South Carolina, there's a whole bunch of Energy Star schools that are right up around Greenville County. This is Charleston. That's me. And I'm fighting those two guys, and they keep saying, we got more schools, and I'm like, yeah, but I got a higher percentage, so I win. And then what she said is phenomenal, and it is game-changing, and I will say that if we are not all in here looking at solar as at least an anchor project for the next bond referendum, we ought to be. I've actually gotten one of my schools done. I did it with a 50% subsidy from Duke Energy, but I will tell you that I've cranked the numbers. Do you remember when dual pane and triple pane windows first came out, folks? Your ROI for those was what? 13, 14, 15 years, sometimes as low as 12 years, and we started on them, and we did them. I'm telling you right now, at $3 a watt installed, these things are working out to around an ROI of 12 to 15 years without the subsidies. If you can get into a third-party financing arrangement like that, it's super, but try to start cranking the numbers and look and see, because you can create a heck of a nice windfall in your general operating budget. In the state of South Carolina, we actually had some laws changed, and they transferred all the property tax basis for our operating funds to a sales tax basis. The problem is they implemented that right at the end of 2008, start of 2009. What happened with sales taxes? Whew. So we suffered. Anytime I can find $1 in a general fund, it's worth $2 or $3 in a capital fund. So solar, solar, solar. And anytime you can actually have an energy program that watches what bills you're paying, and you happen to, like my energy manager, find where the city had overcharged us, and you get a board member or somebody like that from the community that says, you spent $60,000 on that energy manager, you could have bought a teacher, you could have bought more teachers for that. You lay that check on that desk and you say, you can buy your teachers now. And each time you need to show those savings where you're saving multiples of a teacher, multiples of their own salary every year. We've been riding at right around $2 million a year cost avoided for the past 7 years. So we've been able to buy some teachers. And that really is what it matters to. It's all about the people. Last thing I got, I actually saw this in a high school math teacher's room. Notice what is happening there. The thing on the back is called a thermistor. Okay, notice, and I didn't stage this, notice the bumper sticker on the side of the bookcase. And I'm not kidding you, I really didn't manage this. I just got closer and I went, and pulled it away. They were darn sure they were going to be able to outsmart the thermostat. The guy, the teacher in the next room over just said, screw it, and hung a work light on the thermostat. Bad teacher. But we got some good teachers. And we've got, this is our poster contest. I got the Duke Energy and the city water folks and the natural gas folks to pony up $1,000 each on this poster contest for students, and we gave the winning students elementary, middle, we did light switch plate stickers, and high, we did some stickers for the rooms at the high school, each $1,000, and automatic engagement, and that's it.
Tony Cox, thank you so much. We are out of time, but we will take one question from the audience for both of our presenters.
So when we talk about PV, some of the biggest problem is battery storage. Lithium's very unsafe, all the stuff. Salt batteries are now becoming a big thing. They're very, have you looked into use of salt batteries? Because they've got almost a 1-to-1 ratio. They're great for uses when we don't have a mobile condition. So have you looked into use of salt batteries?
Yeah, we've been looking at all sorts of different technology, and it's really interesting because that's something that's definitely come up. We're, as you can imagine, we're sort of bound by all of these entities that are involved, and because battery storage is happening, it's still pretty new, right? So with public schools, no one really wants to use the public schools as a testing ground for some of this technology just because of the fact that it's public schools, student safety is of course of paramount concern. So we're kind of trying to balance these things. We're trying to be practical, but we're also very much trying to be innovative and to be kind of partners in doing some of this. And I don't know that we'll be the first to land one of these batteries, whatever type it is. But I know that it's definitely, we're making pretty rapid progress. Again, a lot of the things, these conversations have been going on for a couple of years, and really they're surrounding the concerns from the fire department, which obviously we can't ignore. But that's absolutely on the docket. Yeah, that and any other tech.
There's salt water, and
yep.
There's no explosive, no hazardous chemicals. I mean, and it's almost a 1-to-1 storage,
right?
Which you don't get with any of the other methods.
Yeah, which is a very key characteristic, and that's absolutely something that we would want to have. We don't want to lose its efficiency just because it's So, yes, and I'll keep you posted because hopefully we'll have more to report soon.
All right, thank you so much, Meredith McDermott, Tony Cox. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Yeah.